You're back with newsPeeks. I'm James Topley. Here with me is Bernd, highly influential German hacktivist and, amongst other things, the creator of the first antivirus software. Next to him is Ruth Oldenziel, a very famous author of many books to do with computer processes, and recently she's the editor and contributor to the introduction of Hacking Europe, a book which is available at the Symposium to buy. I guess my first question is, could either of you define what hacking means to you and hackers in general?
I mean, I've been doing this kind of stuff for the last 35 years, so it's very hard to define hacking, what it really means. I mean, 30 years ago when people said, what is a hacker? How do you define a hacker? We said, we can't. You're not a hacker by self-declaration. You are a hacker if other people call you hacker. Yeah. And of course, everyone has different connotations to go with the term hacker. I mean, in the US, you're close to a criminal. In the UK, you're at least a nasty person. And in Germany, and that's our luck, you're considered as the Robin Data. You are the protector of privacy and anonymity. So there are different things to go with that. But of course, hacking always means to have a joyful approach to technology. Don't be limited by what people tell you where technology can be used. Go over the intended use of a technology.
And you, Ruth?
Well, I would say you have to also approach it not only according to place where it means something different in different places, but also in time. I mean, we have to remember in the 80s that software was not really protected, or there was no interest by the corporations. IBM was not interested in selling software to personal users because they were so focused on professional users. So we have the example of Greek stores who help users to crack and different codes because they were not ready for the market to cater to Greek users. So they called themselves pirates. They called themselves hackers. And we have to understand in the 80s and early 90s, that was perfectly legal. There was no seizure, nothing censorship against that. So it's also an historical term. But I think that also historically, I think you're absolutely right. Hacking is also the love, the play, for the heck of it, just to show, to tweak the system. So it is a moment in time, and I think right now it means something very differently, and we can say that in the 80s and the 90s, big corporations and the state really didn't know what to do with this, were not interested, didn't know its potential, and now today they do know the potential, and so it has a very different meaning, and it's now criminalized, and the question is there still fun in hacking? I think that that's sort of historically what one needs to ask.
Well, that leads to my next question, which is how much of it is a playful enterprise and how much of it is a sort of intellectual exercise? Because you in your book in the introduction outline consistently that it is a playful thing, that they're doing it for almost fun or just an intellectual exercise and just stimulation. Because that was the reasoning behind your...
Is there a difference between it? I mean, you can have fun and you can enjoy doing intellectual challenges. And a lot of things we did was actually just to prove we can do it in the early times. I mean, as Ruth said, there was no legal framework to go with it. I mean, when in 1984, hackers from the Chaos Computer Club hacked into the BTX system and transferred 100,000 US dollars to their own account, there was actually not even a crime. The police later told us that if it would have come to if we had wanted the money from the bank, and there would be a court case probably, we can only be fined with a $10,000 fine because it was not a crime; it was a felony. I think that's the English term for it, right? But that makes it very important that we constrained ourselves. I mean, we always approach technology joyful, but we know there are limitations to it. I mean, we have to have a responsible way to deal with technology.
Yeah, but I think that that is very much the CCC's
Sure.
position.
Mhm.
And I think that historically, the play that we saw yesterday and what's going on just now between Pango and WOW Holland is the spectrum. I think that for many hackers, it was just the fun, just to show your mastery, the skill that you could do it, and that it was an end in of itself. And I think the Chaos Computer Club really added something that we have to understand in the context of German history, of saying, yeah, but you're responsible for the play, the rules, and what you use it for. And looking at that play, you know, it's 1989 that took place, that discussion. And we look at it today, and I think it is as pertinent and as important, that question today. Play, I would say, is not just an end in of itself for many people, and the question is, what's your responsibility? But there's also a political use of play. You know, irony, to be able to, I won't say make fun of the powers that be, but that's also implied that by playing, you play with power, you show power, and that can be a powerful thing to say something political. So play is many different things. And then there's also the theory of play, that our culture, it's not only serious business, but play is very much part of who we are.
Right, so you'd say that both of you have a different idea of where the limits lie in hacking and the web in general.
I would say there's no consensus, but I think it's what is important.
But so would that mean that there are no limits in general, though? If you disagree where the limits are, surely that would lead to people saying there are no limits.
Well, I think asking the question, that's the powerful thing. Where does the limit? You know, where's the limit? And I think that is sort of where the Chaos Computer Club is really important historically and still today, is to ask that question. And hacking so much in the popular culture and in films and so forth, it is on the other side of the spectrum of just for the heck of it, just for the fun of it, without taking your responsibility. And we have this image of, you know, young boys, 14 years old, who do not know what they're doing, and they all of a sudden they're a part of a power play in the way that Pango was representing it. I think that that's a kind of Hollywood explanation. There's some historical truth to it, but given our security state today and what's at stake, I think the question of 1989 is the question we need to ask. You know, what are the limits? You know, where does play and no longer is just play as a political tool, but becomes very serious and people get hurt, and where it gets criminalized.
And where are the ethical sides to the limits? Like, because that's a big part. Because with the limits, there's an ethical sense, isn't there? That's kind of the underlying thing. Is that it's up to the, you know, it's an ethical question.
Yeah, but as Ruth said, everyone has to answer that question for himself. The Chaos Computer Club can probably give some guidelines on how to decide that, but in the end, it's up to every person. And from my experience over the decades now, I can say that people who have just this playful approach to technology be hackers for maybe 5, 6, 7 years, and then they do something completely different. Find a family or take a normal job, do the normal work. Mostly in the IT industry, but nothing to do with hacker anymore. So for us who are doing it for such a long time, of course there must be more to it than just having fun. And of course it's not just about to think and discuss where are the limits of hacking. I mean, that's the personal question of your responsibility. I mean, in the end, most of these hackers agree that that at the core, a good hack is something that is not just fun, but has some usefulness to it as well.
Serves a purpose.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you also say, I mean, you're saying that it's ultimately a personal decision, but there's also a political part to it, is who decides what the limits are? You know, who decides where a hack is no longer fun, but is a criminal act. Well, there you are up against power. So it's not, you know, the decision is not only an individual decision, it's also part of a political system, and I think that needs to be said as well. I mean, ultimately...
I don't completely agree. Of course, there are legal frameworks that define limits, but a lot of hackers have problems with authority. I think, let's put it that way. So they do not take orders easily and follow rules they don't understand or see senseless, right? So this, of course, leads. What are the moral grounds on which you base your decision if you do something or don't do something? And from my point of view, it seems to be more important to base this decision on your own moral standards than on any written law. I mean, written law can change, you know? I mean, I remember in 1981 when the peace movement in Germany was big, so that blocking the street in Mutlangen to prevent the installment of the Pershing II rockets, I mean, that was a crime. 10 years later, the highest court in Germany decided, no, that's right of free assembly, so that's protected by our constitution. So law can change, and therefore law is probably not the most important decisive factor in our decision.
But there is this idea with hacking and collected groups of hackers that a personal might have a sort of an anarchy to him that a group like the Chaos Computer Club wouldn't, and that's the difference between individual hackers and when they collectivize. Because I mean, people would say that they're stronger as a collective group because they're going against people like the NSA and their contractors who collectivize. So why wouldn't hackers rising against them try and collectivize as a group in order to combat their power? Well,
okay, let me say something. I say as a historian and someone who thinks about how social movements come about. I think ultimately we have to acknowledge that the life on the net and off the net are not so very different. And of course, we are in love with the technology, or we have been since the 80s, of the power that it can give you. But I also believe that ultimately technology is just a tool and not more or less for whatever you think it's important, a better society, a better future, robust human rights or whatever. So I think ultimately to do this in a collective is always stronger and more important than doing it and going it as an individual. But that is because social movements are more powerful than one individual. And that's also, I think, what this conference is about, is to say, okay, one whistleblower, no matter how powerful and impressive Snowden is, ultimately it's about what he represents and the social movement.
He's been victimized.
Yeah, and that's also true for hacking. Hacking as an individual act, might be interesting, but I think hacking as a movement, as a set of ideas, is much more powerful, and that's what we're really talking about.
And we should not forget, I think at this point, that at least I consider Snowden a hacker as well. I mean, he maybe have different moral reasons why he did work with the NSA in the first place. I wouldn't have done that at all, but it was his decision. But he came to a moral decision to say, no, through my technology approach as a hacker, I have access to data I think should be revealed to the public because it's the right of the public to know. So he made a decision based on his moral grounds, not on the law. I mean, he knew what he was risking. So that makes, for me, that makes him a hacker, definitely.
But so you don't think that people are more accountable when they're in groups? I mean, I assume you do, and they're more, when people collectivize, they're stronger often.
I mean, it's not about accountability. I mean, even if you're in a group and do something, you're accountable for what you do. No group can take that responsibility away from you. But sharing ideas, knowing that there are people that share your value system, that have these same ideas, the same perspectives, the same vision, that makes you stronger, definitely.
Yeah, I would like to add that one thing that needs emphasizing is what hacking or hacktivism has defined as a good hack is really to hack for the public good. And that is something, the public good is something that is not the state, is not information for commercial use, but is for something that's for the collective good. I think that that's a very important aspect of the political sides of hacking.
Definitely.
And sometimes, I mean, in a good society, the state speaks on behalf of the public good. The problem is that, of course, the state also speak on behalf of itself.
And corporations, you know.
Sorry?
And corporations and other businesses.
Yeah, and today what is historically so very interesting is that we now have corporations who are on the side of hackers when it comes to representing privacy or whatever. But it's not what the hackers movement necessarily agree on a fundamental level. I think it's a coalition, a convergence in today that's the case, that we now, because corporations also, as we know with NSA, have been in alliance with the state against hackers.
Can we call that digital enlightenment?
What?
That hackers actually, that the change in society we see today about approaching technology, that it's in a way based on what hackers did years ago or decades ago, and now it's becoming mainstream. More people think, okay.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, from a technology studies point of view, which is my expertise, it's always, you know, any new technology, when it comes into the world, it doesn't have a script. You don't know what to do with it. It was true with radio, television, and so forth. And there's this moment where some group sees the moment. And I think that happened in the 80s and the 90s, that hackers took this tool and said, hey, this is great, this is wonderful, we can do something for the public good. And the state didn't know what to do with it, and corporations didn't know what to do with it, and now they do. And so then the question is, what is the place of hacking today? Do they have the same kind of opportunity and power as at the time? I think the answer is no. But it does, you know, for the future it's important. Well, what is the place of hacking? And where can it go vis-a-vis this enormous power of the mainstream and corporations and the state?
I mean, that's what I meant when I said that the mainstream is taking over ideas we had in the 80s. I mean, when we started with computers, we said the computer is a tool to communicate. I mean, the people laughed at us. They said, no, a computer is something to compute. Yeah. It can do number crunching, it can basically control things, but communication, what's that? Right? So now the largest companies on earth are based on communication between and with the help of computers.
Can we
Fantastic.
stop for a moment?
Yeah, we're going to have to finish up here now anyway.
No, but because I think for a younger generation, this is incomprehensible, because you laugh to say it's for communication. Of course it's for communication. Yeah. You have to understand
because people use it for media and everything, gaming, you know.
Yes, but at the time, computers was just an enormous machine in a anonymous building where they were crunching mathematical formulas for the military. That was the only thing a computer could do. Calculation, calculation, calculation. So that was really the revolutionary idea. Let's send a message from one person to another. The ARPANET was not equipped to do that. And so somebody invented the email and the usernet, and that was the revolutionary moment.
Or connected computers to the telephone net. I remember in the 80s, it was a crime to connect your computer to the telephone net yourself. In Germany, at least. I mean, other countries were different. You could go to jail for 5 years. That was harder punished than the accidental, if you accidentally have an atomic explosion because you were uncareful in your power plant. That was only punished with 3 years, up to 3 years. So that most people simply did not understand what that means. And I'm often asked, oh, in the 80s, how did you Twitter? I mean, that's the perspective that's how people perceive the internet today or computers today. But that was completely different 30 years ago.
I think that's...
And you see it continuing to change, though. I mean, more. Where do you see it going? Corporate and commercial gain, or do you think it will become the democratic tool that people have? No, doubtful.
I think that, as I said, there is now a closure of possibilities. The free space, the space for communication and as a democratic tool for revolutions is closing fast. And so I think that is, it needs to be broken up again. And what worries me greatly for this generation, and everybody needs to see the documentary on Snowden, and there's someone who says, well, everything about the public space is now seen as an issue about privacy. Well, if you say the public space is really issues of privacy, and privacy is gone, there's no public space. And that, I think that is something that we need to understand today, is the public space is disappearing.
And of course, it's the development of technology that makes something like the mass surveillance we see today possible. I mean, 30 years ago, or let's say 40 years ago, secret services had the same mindset, but they had to send people to follow you, to break into your home, go through your files, physical files. Nowadays, they can do it with computers, so they profit from the technology as well. So it's probably a little bit like an arms race, so there is no winner, and there probably will be no one.
Which you pick up on your book. I mean,
well, but I would say that, okay, that's a very negative story to say. The tools have become so large that there's no escape. I would say, from a technology point of view, is there will be another technology. So it's always trying to stay ahead of the game. That is what it's all about. But every technology, also computers, get domesticated by the top powers that be. And you have to, as a thinking political citizen, you have to grab the tools that are there for you. And now the tool today is encryption, to protect yourself. But I'm sure that in a couple of years' time, the other side will find another tool. But that's what it's about. It's trying to keep ahead and keep articulating why you use the tools that you want to use, and not to make the tools an end in and of itself. I think that's sort of the lesson.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much both for coming in today. It was very, very interesting. This is newsPeeks Live. I'm James Topley. We got Daniel Ellsbeck next with Sylvia Mann interviewing him. Thank you very much.